All right, so thanks for joining me. I'm going to be reading why Polycarp is important. And who is Polycarp? Most people are like, who's Polycarp? I've never even heard the name. But we're talking about our church tradition, and I want to show exactly why we believe what we believe so you guys can be able to read and understand what's happening. So I'm going to start off with who is Polycarp. And that's going to be the most important thing because if you're going to look at somebody, an ancient church father, it's almost impossible to skip over a guy like this. So, first off, he was a disciple of the apostles, specifically John, but he was also the bishop of Smyrna. And so these are the two things, and he's in the first and second centuries whenever he was actually the bishop. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that. So first off, we have right over here, I'm going to read a few excerpts from our church fathers. Irenaeus Against Heresies, Book 3, Chapter 3. And if you don't know who Irenaeus is, he's another church father from 120 to 140 AD was when he was born, and this is according to the Britannica. But his death date is a little more certain at 200 or 203. He was a missionary to Gaul and the bishop of Lugdunum. Never heard of that church before, but I know he was well reputed from his contemporaries. But Polycarp also was not only instructed by apostles and conversed with many who had seen Christ, but was also by apostles in Asia appointed bishop in the church of Smyrna. So whenever you talk about doctrine, there's nobody who's more important than apostles or those appointed by apostles. So in my opinion, it's very clear that he has more credibility and value in anything that he writes than anybody else. Whatever it might be, it doesn't matter if it contradicts this man. Because the odds that he was right and you were wrong are a whole lot higher that he was right and you're wrong. And so that's what's super important. He knew most of the apostles. It sounds like, according to Irenaeus, that not only that, he was appointed by the apostles as a bishop of Smyrna. So that gives him extreme credibility whenever you look at what he's saying, and whenever he speaks or talks or says anything, you really want to pay attention because he's probably right. So then Irenaeus goes on to say, whom I also saw in my early youth. So now Irenaeus knew him. So now you're looking at a transmission from apostles to to Polycarp to Irenaeus. For he tarried on the earth a very long time, and when a very old man, gloriously and most nobly suffering martyrdom, departed this life, having always taught the things which he had learned from the apostles, and which the church has handed down, and which are true. And then later on he mentions specifically the letter to the Philippians. So now he's saying he's handed down the truth to us. But then he's also mentioned by Ignatius, which is even sooner than Irenaeus. And he was the third bishop of Antioch. Now, it depends on who you look at. Some people say Peter is the first, which obviously Peter is the first. But some people don't really even include Peter, so they start at Evodius. And Evodius was actually one of the disciples, one of the 70 plus disciples of Christ whenever he sent them out. So Evodius is pretty important. And then right after him was Ignatius. So Ignatius also mentions Polycarp and has correspondence with Polycarp. And so now you're talking about somebody else who is also directly involved with the apostles. So this is a really big deal too. Anything he says has high credibility because he is in Antioch where they were first called Christians. It's not the Evodius with an A, but US. So don't mistake it for the one in the Bible. He died in 110 AD by animals in the arena. That's how he was killed. And once again, that source is the Britannica. The letter to the Ephesians, chapter 21, my soul. So now here he is writing to the Ephesians. My soul be yours and theirs, whom for the honor of God ye have sent to Smyrna, whence also I write to you, giving thanks unto the Lord and loving Polycarp. So he mentions Polycarp there. Then he writes to the Magnesians in chapter 15, the Ephesians from Smyrna, whence I also write to you, who are here for the glory of God, as ye also are, who have in all things refreshed me, salute you along with Polycarp, the bishop of the Smyrnaeans. Then letter to Smyrna itself, I salute your most worthy bishop, Polycarp. Then he wrote another letter to Polycarp, greeting Ignatius, who is called Theophorus. Now that's what his surname was. And if you know, in ancient Greek times, Roman times, Jewish times, sometimes they had as many as 4 different names to identify themselves. So Ignatius is also Theophorus. But he says, to Polycarp, the bishop of the church of the Smyrnaeans, or rather, who has as his own bishop God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. So now he's saying he's pretty much the chief bishop of all the church is Polycarp. This is a very big statement from Ignatius. But not only that, it doesn't matter. It just shows what he says has great value. More value than any book we could write today is the value of Polycarp. Then there's Irenaeus again. But he was writing and he had copied somebody called Papias. Now he was the bishop of Hierapolis, and he was also a contemporary of Polycarp. And so he lived with him at the same time. So you have 3 people really that are super important that reference him. It's Irenaeus, Ignatius, and Polycarp. I mean, Polycarp letters himself as well, which we'll get to, his letter to the Philippians. And then the bishop of Hierapolis, Papias. So those 4 sources give extreme relevance to everything that Polycarp says. And so now Irenaeus wrote down what the bishop of Hierapolis, Papias, had said. Testimony is borne to these things in writing by Papias, an ancient man, so this is Irenaeus writing, who was a hearer of John and friend of Polycarp. So now it says that not only was Polycarp a hearer of John's, but so was Papias. In the 4th of his books, 5 books were composed by him, and he added, saying, now these things are credible to believers. So now this is Irenaeus writing about this, and he also mentions Polycarp. So there's a lot of reason, once again, to follow what Papias or Polycarp says. So if you look at the lineage of Christ, his spiritual lineage, because that's what's most important for us, you see that there was Christ, there was John, and then John converted Polycarp. And so Polycarp took over the church at Smyrna. And this is an extremely important aspect of the gospel. And you may not know why this is important, but whenever you read his letter and we begin to get into doctrine, it's extremely important to get a foundation of why he's a good writer and why we should listen to him. And so really that's all I'm doing right now, is I'm laying the foundation and letting you know who Polycarp is. This is a bishop of Smyrna, ancient Turkey, also Asia. He was a big deal in dealing with major problems in that area. This is going to be the format of how we're doing it. I'm going to read why he's important, how we know he was an apostle from the apostles, why his writings are more important than anyone else's writings, and then we're just going to read just his writings to see what he said. And so he's referenced by several of these people as his acts and other things that happened, but we're going to reference just what he said in the letter of an eyewitness account about him. And then after that, we're going to go to the next person who will also reference Polycarp. But Polycarp, major character. And if you're going to get doctrine, and if you're going to contradict doctrine of Polycarp, you're going to have a major problem. And I'm going to show you, I'm excited, I can't wait to show you how he lines up with everything that we say as though nothing has changed in 2,000 years. Just remember, Polycarp is an important man. He was set up by the apostles. He was the bishop of Smyrna, and he was most likely the convert of John and was discipled by the apostles. So, as I said, if anybody's got right doctrine, it's going to be Polycarp.